And also thank you all for being here. Today I want to talk a little bit about my research, and it's going to be divided in two sections. In the first section, I want to talk more about preliminary preliminary findings from my preliminary research, and then I also want to talk a little bit more about next steps that I want to conduct during this year. My presentation is called Assessment of State Enforcement Capacity to Control Illegal Gold Extraction and Environmental Harms in the Peruvian Amazon. Specifically, my research is focused on the Department of Madre de Dios. So just a brief outline of what I want to present today. First, some theoretical motivations, context that in what I want to frame my research. The first context is this neo-extractivist trend in Latin America. And more in theoretical terms, I want to frame my research in the green criminology literature. And also I want to discuss the green criminology contribution for research on tropical conservation and development, how this new area can contribute also to research about tropical conservation. And like I said, I also want to talk a little bit about preliminary findings on artisanal and small-scale gold mining in Madre de Dios that I found these last 2 years working in that area. And then some next research steps. And in particular, I want to present the next research steps because I would like to get a lot of feedback. So please feel free just to stop me if you have questions and ask me whatever you want. Okay, then about the theoretical motivations. First about neo-extractivism, this neo-extractivist trend in Latin America. Neo-extractivism is characterized or defined as the increased investment in extractive sectors to promote economic growth. It also can be understood as this new tendency towards a reprimarization of the economy. And by reprimarization, I mean the return to producing, again, primary goods as a new national development approach of the Latin American states. Some key features of the neo-extractivist models are the larger scale of projects. And for instance, in this case, we have these big hydroelectric dams, buildings, and mining projects. Also, another important key feature is the promotion of monoculture, for instance, the promotion and the expansion of agribusinesses in general. And also, a third key feature is the expansion of the extractive frontiers in terms of fishing, mining as well, logging frontiers. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Sorry, Johanna.
Yeah.
What do you mean? What is it? How do you find an extractive sector? And why is agriculture extractive sector?
Okay, in this case, is the agribusiness sector could be considered as an extractive sector, not agriculture in general. More agriculture that is oriented toward huge production, that is oriented in the largest scale, as a larger scale, as monoculture, the expansion of monoculture, not agriculture in general. Sorry?
Does extractive mean large scale?
In this case, it's more related to that, to large scale projects, to big scale projects. Yeah, or that's what I mean in the frame of this kind of literature. Okay, some additional features of neo-extractivism. The renaissance of the development state to perform some different functions. First, to steer and to regulate the economies of extraction, also to appropriate extra revenues, to act as an agent of development, and also to address social questions via supporting of development projects, and to create political legitimacy for itself through democratic elections. They're the new roles that the development state is performing in this frame. All of this despite some of the well-known effects of the intensification of raw material extraction and consumption, among them, the global climate change, soil depletion, deforestation, loss of food sovereignty, decline in biodiversity, pollution of fresh water, and also other related effects. So what is evident is that there is still a need to address, in terms of research, both the sociological and the ecological effects of this kind of development paths, as well as the role of this new role of the state, or this new state action on promoting these extractive economic activities. This with regard to the new extractivist model. Then I also want to mention the green criminology contribution to the research on tropical conservation and development. Okay, green criminology, the main focus on green criminology is more on environmental harms, and it clearly distinguishes between environmental harms and green crime. By green crime, I mean every act that is prescribed by law. So it's very narrow in some way, but green criminology takes this broader approach, focusing on environmental harm instead of only specifically on those acts prescribed by law. That implies a difference between what is the law as law in books, what is written in the books, and what is the law in action. It's not only what is in the law, written in the law, but how you implement that kind of law, how you enforce that legal frameworks and legal mechanisms to regulate these extractive activities. Specifically in the case of mining practices, that is my research area, this difference between law in books and law in actions creates very different categories, or at least 4 different categories from what I saw in a brief legal review. There are some mining practices that are directly considered as illegal, and because they are proscribed and forbidden by law. But some of these activities, some of these practices that are considered as illegal are in fact enforced by enforcement agencies that have the responsibility to control them. But there are also other illegal practices that are forbidden by law that I want to examine why are not enforced. What are the problems there that, or the reasons why, the factors why these illegal practices are not enforced. Then there are also these legal practices that are legal and are regulated, can be also in this sector, and again, there's no such controversy in that sense. But there are also some legal practices that are not that are unregulated. So there is like a gray area. So where there's a practice that is not really forbidden, it's not allowed, it's a gap, it's not in the law. So enforcement agencies, for instance, don't know exactly how to deal with this kind of mining practices because they are not really forbidden, they are not really allowed. So in that case, my research is going to be more focused on these 2 that are the ones that generate more controversy or polemic. The illegal that are not enforced, trying to examine what factors hinder the enforcement of law, and also this gray area of legal practices that are not very well regulated, that there is a gap in the law in that sense, or conflicts between different laws, conflict between mining law and environmental law, or even conflicts in the same mining laws. Okay, so in some green criminology approach can account in particular for this enforcement action, or for how this law, the law in action, is implemented. The law in book is implemented. how we have this law in action, how the law can be really enforced. Okay. How to combine both new extractivism and green criminology in my research? Since neo-extractivists emphasize state policies to promote development via extractive economies, it means that neo-extractivism is more focused on a national scale explanation. While, as I'm going to mention later more in detail, green criminology is more focused on a local explanation. But anyways, neo-extractivism has this focus more on national scale explanations. It begs questions such as whether and how the state permits this illegal extractive activity. And some explanations about whether and how the state permits these illegal extractive activities can be that the states may permit illegal activities by writing their laws with loopholes, the law in books, or by failing to enforce the law in action. Okay, and as I said, in the green criminology literature, green criminology tends to underscore the importance of environmental harms where they occur, which means the focus is more on local scale or regional also scale explanations. Which offers a distinct set of explanations, where because local actors sometimes may have contested elements with the national actors. You can see that sometimes there are conflicts between the local and the national actors, between the local government and the national governments. So in that sense, green criminology could provide a more compelling explanation of those dynamics. Okay, that about the theoretical motivations and in general the framework in which I would like to frame my research. And then I want to talk a little bit about some of the preliminary findings about artisanal and small-scale gold mining in Madre de Dios. First, I'm gonna present some of the specific characteristics of this kind of mining. It's alluvial gold mining that is mainly focused on creeks on rivers. Some of the general features. There's a lack or very little planning on extraction and also on processing, on gold processing. It has been facilitated by new infrastructure access in the last years. It has been subject to a series of environmental and labor laws. So there are many written laws, mining laws, labor laws, environmental laws, these laws in books, which led us to think that may be practiced legally, but nowadays is often or most illegal. Also, it implies that there are still a lot of controversy and still a polemic over the prospects of formalization of this kind of mining in this area. And finally, that there are limited inquiry into these specific mining practices and especially into the legal status of these practices. They are illegal, if they are informal, if they are legal, if they are enforced, or the reason why there are no these enforcement mechanisms. They are not working. Okay, well, this is a map of the department of Madre de Dios where my research is focused. The four main mining districts, historically mining districts, are Huepetue, Laberinto, Inambari, Madre de Dios, that are located in this yellow area where mining is allowed by the government. It is officially known as mining corridor. But the problem is that people that is operating there don't have the legal permit. So in this department, any people that is working has permits, and there are registered more than 5,000 miners, but no one has permits for operating. precisely because of a conflict between the regional government and the national government, in particular about the responsibility of who should grant these permits. Anyway, an additional problem is that mining and illegal mining is not working only inside the corridor, but also new frontiers are open within these green, dark green areas are buffer zones. No, these are protected areas. So in those protected areas, of course, mining is completely forbidden, but new frontiers are open every day in that area. Some of the impacts of this gold production in Madre de Dios, as you are going to see in these two maps. In the first map, we have the buffer zone of the Tambopata National Park. This green one is the buffer zone, and on Manu National Park, that one is also the buffer zone. And in this other one, you have the areas that are affected by illegal and informal gold mining. So you can see that there is a complete overlap. Most of gold mining is located in Tambopata province, and in Manu province, there are no really affecting Tambopata province. Also, other impacts of gold mining in Madre de Dios is gold mining on deforestation within the Tambopata National Reserve. Here in this map, it's interesting that in the south of this river is the Tambopata National Reserve, and in the north of the river is the buffer zone. But as you can see, the deforestation rates in the last year, here in yellow and in red, are increasing within the Tambopata National Reserve. The problem with the law in action there is that while mining is completely forbidden within the Tambopata National Reserve, in the buffer zone can be allowed with permits. Still, people don't have those permits that can be allowed. So that's some of the problems between the implementation and enforcement of the law. Okay, another finding is that there are nuances that should be addressed. Basically, in terms of how mining extraction looks like, we can find differences in mining activity, like there are small scale mining operating there, also artisanal mining that is different, the equipment that they use, the resources that they need, the capital that they need is different. Also, illegal mining, like the mining within the national park, the protected area that is completely forbidden. And there are also other secondary activities that are very related and dependent of the mining, like these linkages between agriculture and mining, and there are groups specifically organizing around these agriculture and mining linkages. There are also different in the process of gold production itself. It's different extraction, it's different the effects of extraction, the effects of the extraction on site is different from the gold processing, which includes the amalgamation and the use of mercury that is also on site. But there are also other processes like the smelting, the use of flames that liberate toxins and mercury into the air that is off-site. It is usually performed in very small towns close to the extraction sites, but not on extraction site, but in the small towns close. Here I'm gonna just show some pictures of how this kind of extraction looks like. In the case of artisanal gold mining, it's more with a different equipment, close to the river, which is completely forbidden by law. And this is a small scale operation where you have these loose boxes that process the sand that is extracted. So as you can see, it requires a different kind of equipment and capital. This is an example of illegal gold mining because of the use of the river dredge, which is also completely forbidden. And these three different kind of extraction, artisanal, small scale, and illegal gold mining are extraction on site. But then we also have the, like I said, the processing of the gold in the using mining processes, or also amalgamation to combine. In this process of amalgamation, they use the mercury to combine the gold in just one small ball, the sand gold. And then the use of retorting to separate these gold particles and get all of the dust out. Okay, so taking into account that theoretical motivation and also these preliminary findings of this last year, now I plan to go back again this year and just to try to continue with my research. So I have been thinking about questions and that can help me to examine these factors that differentiate between these, or that sometimes promote, sometimes hinder this conflict between what is written in law and what is really implemented and enforced and controlled. So in that sense, my general research objective is to determine whether these illegal practices are involved in artisanal and small-scale gold mining, and examine the extent that these practices or these unintended consequences are the result of a limited or a lack of law enforcement of mining regulatory frameworks and policies that are designed precisely to prevent these unintended consequences. My aim with that objective is to offer an evaluation of the extent to which these national factors that are framing the neo-extractivist approach, and also this regional and local factor that can be explained more by a green criminology approach, account for the legal status of these practices and also for the enforcement and control of these mining practices. So my first expectation, and from that expectation, my first research question is that according to the theory, environmental activities that are environmentally harmful, employing gold production on site, these primary activities, will not include illegal specific practices. According to the law, according to the theory, because they are not crime, they can generate environmental harms, but since they are not crime, they should not include illegal specific practices. But in case they actually do so, my question is what and why of these specific mining practices are unenforced and unregulated, whether they are legal or illegal. To try to explain this like with a more specific example, I want to focus on 3 environmental harmful activities that are carried on site, performed on site. The clear cutting of forests, the sluicing, and the amalgamation. These are clearly environmental harmful activity because of the environmental harm that they generate. In the first case, clear cutting that generates deforestation. In the second case, it's sluicing that generates water turbidity into the rivers. And in the third case, amalgamation that generates the release of this toxic substance. But in every activity, we have very specific mining practices. So in the first case, for instance, in the case of the clear cutting of forests, a very specific mining practices is to remove every tree from an area that is located in the mining corridor. Another specific mining practices is remove every tree from an area that is located in a protected area. And they are different because of where they are located. And what I want to examine is also what is the law content about those specific mining practices. For instance, to remove every tree from an area located in the mining corridor, it can be done. It requires a permit that is granted by an institution, therefore, that is located in Lima, but it can be done in theory. While remove every tree from an area in a protected area, according to the law, is completely forbidden. Then, in the second case, in the case of leucine and specific mining practices for that, for instance, one specific mining practices could be the leaching of the remaining dust and mud and waste tailings directly into the river. And the law said that it's not allowed to operate close to river, so forbidden thing. Another specific activity practice is the use of dredge to remove the layer of salt that contains the gold fragment. That is completely forbidden by law because of the use of dredges is forbidden, but not the use of other equipment. So in that case, there's again nuances between what is forbidden, what can be done. In the case of the amalgamation activity, two specific mining practices. One is the use of mercury and cyanide. The other one is the use of sulfuric acid. In the first case, is forbidden, and in the second can be allowed, but again with permit granted by another enforcement agency, that is the SUNAT. So these are some of the specific mining practices. My idea now is to create a database trying to identify other specific mining practices that can be, and look at what the law has to say about those specific mining practices, but after that, how in reality these are implemented or not. A second expectation that I have is that environmentally harmful activities that take place off-site, because the previous one are activities that take place on-site, is the extraction activities. In this case, secondary taking place is off-site. That's why I call them secondary activities. Will not include illegal specific practices because they are not environmental kinds. But in the case they include those specific illegal practices, then my question is again, what the specific practices and why some of these specific practices are enforced and why others are unregulated. In this case, I'm gonna focus on two activities. One is gold smelting to processing the gold, and the other is an inadequate waste management in these small towns close to the extraction sites. The environmental harm that they generate in the case of the gold smelting is the release of toxic substances into the air, specifically of mercury, and in the second case is the pollution of surface water, soil, air. Some specific practices in the case of gold smelting is this use of flames in the small town close to the extraction sites, in small shops to remove the impurities and separate mercury from gold during the selling process, which is not really forbidden by law. There is a gap there. Law says nothing about that. What law says about this small shop is that they are supposed not to exist, because the only legal buyer is an institution called Activos Mineros. So all of these other small shops that are operating there are supposed not to operate there. But it doesn't say anything about the process itself. Then, with regard to the inadequate waste management, it is very easy to observe that waste is not collected close to highways, and also that the waste is disposed directly to rivers, and there is no regulation on this kind of waste collection and handling of the waste in buffer zones. So it's an example of this legal but unregulated, because they are not illegal because they are not forbidden, but it's because there is a gap in the law. So that could be an example of that kind of situation. And here is only a picture of that kind of activity. It's a mining camp, and the waste disposal directly to the rivers. And the last research question is completely focused on an evaluation of the formalization process. So the state, or we assume, or what theory says, is that the state will strengthen positive factors that entail mining formalization in order to generate more revenues, and in that sense, more economic benefits that can be redistributed. But if that's not the case, then I want to examine what factors have impelled or hindered the attempts to regulate this illegality in gold production in Madre de Dios, namely the process of formalization. Like I said, this is a evaluation. My idea here is to examine, to evaluate what factors have impelled and what factors have hindered the implementation of the process of formalization in the last years. And about that question, that is a diagram of how it is supposed to work. The national government should promote these positive factors that lead to a mining formalization according to the expectation if the new extractivist model, which will permit a national economic development. But different agencies, because within the national government as itself, there are very different institutions and ministries and secretaries that sometimes have different interests. So they are not unified. They don't have only positive factors that can lead to a mining formalization. They can also promote negative factors that would hinder the mining formalization. And in addition to the national government and the different agencies within the national government, there are also other actors, as you know, social, political, economic actors, local governments, that in the same sense can have positive influence and can have negative influence in the mining formalization process and in the national development in general. So that's a little bit of the idea with this third question. Okay, how I plan to answer these questions. My data collection is focused on two data collection tools: archival research and semi-structured interviews with key informants. In the case of archival research, I want to review the law decrees from 2000 to present, because in 2000 was created the first law for formalizing and promoting a small scale and artisanal mining. After that period of time, there has been more than 50 related norms, only focused on artisanal and small scale gold mining in Madre de Dios. So the emphasis is going to be after 2011, that is this period of contention after the National Plan of Formalization of Artisanal Mining was created, and also the 8 legal bodies in 2012 that tried to promote this process. I also want to make a review of additional reports and documents, NGO reports that has a lot of, there has been a lot of research about environmental and social impacts of mining in that area, also maps of gold mining concessions, zoning plans with areas that are assigned for the different uses, and regional and local development plans, and results reports of different enforcement actions implemented in the area. And well, I think that that's all about. Please, like I said, my main interest is to get some feedback now that I'm planning to go to the fieldwork again during this year. So if you have any question, any comment, suggestion, I really appreciate all of those.